Well, it's a pleasure and privilege to be moderating this session. And what's very heartening is that right in the morning we have a full hall. So thank you all the audience is there. We're going to talk on Cafe 2 and the future emission norms and what is the road ahead from Cafe 2. And we've got a very distinguished panel with us. Ms. Pamela Tikku represents ICAT, an organization which is in standardization, homologation, and also, I would say, focusing on the new paradigms which are happening in the auto industry in terms of its benchmarks it has to achieve. We have Mr. Vikram Gulati. He's there from Toyota. He's been there for a long time. And then we have Mr. Girish Ramaswamy, who's just come from Bangalore yesterday evening, and will be talking more on the technical part because he represents Vitesco technologies. You know, look at CAFE norms, and most of you would be aware, but just for a simple definition, the abbreviation of CAFE stands for Corporate Average Fuel Efficiency. And one of the objectives which has been there of the government and also of the manufacturers is that how can we enhance fuel efficiency or reduce fuel consumption. And then there is a direct correlation between the reduction of fuel consumption and also reduction of carbon dioxide, which is a good indicator because you're reducing emission and you're reducing the fuel consumption, so which ultimately helps in your import bills and also in a better quality of air. So there was a CAFE 1 norm which was prevailing from 2017 to 22, and there was a rating given, and there's a scale which is given 130 grams per kilometer, and that measures the CO2 emission. And the new norm which has become applicable from April is 113. So from 130 to 113, but it's not that simple. There is a relationship to the curve weight. And when you say corporate, every company is given a certain score. And I would call it like a weighted index, which is a score, which depends on their model mix, how much they sell, and also the curve weight. So there is something what they have achieved and what they should achieve. So the CAFE 2 norms have rolled out in April. And I was just making a simple definition. I was talking to somebody in the industry and outside the industry. They said to understand CAFE norm is like understanding the Duckworth-Lewis system in cricket. The only difference is that Duckworth-Lewis system is used only in case of emergency or in rains, whereas the CAFE 2 norms are going to be part and parcel of day in and day out of the auto industry. But the only problem here is some scores will follow later. And they say the CAFE 2 norms, the way it will be measured, it will follow this year, the next year. So obviously a great initiative. And I would say when we are talking of CAFE 2 norms, it's not just about what technology is there. It's also about policy. It's about the implementation. It's about the vendors, how they gear up, how the new technologies come in. And there are some very unique features in the CAFE norms. You get certain bonus points for having EVs, maybe plug-in, hybrids, or battery electric vehicles, but they cover. And what I understand, Pamela, it's only covered at the moment passenger vehicles. Light trucks were planned trucks, but that's been slightly on the back burner to happen. So coming to it, before we come to the future gazing, and I'll start with you, Vikram. How do you see what has happened in the last few months? Because there was a lot of voice from the industry, it's too strict, already we've gone through BS6, why are we imposing it now? So how's the transition has been? What were the challenges? And where does the industry stand today?
Good morning. First things first, CAFE norms were basically notified in 2017 with a clear roadmap ahead. So 2022 1st April was known. The good thing is that the government has not changed anything, but in between what did happen was two things which were not really planned in 2017. One was the preponement of the BS6 regime, as we all know. This got preponed and it got implemented in 2020. This obviously had an impact in terms of the fuel efficiency. This other thing which was not really factored in was COVID. So these were two things which made everything change for the industry from the starting point of 2017, and hence there was initially an apprehension and a request by the industry to the government to look at the possibility of factoring these two new hitherto unknown developments which have a material impact on implementation of the regime and whether some sort of shift in the timelines could take place. But over a period of time, I think there was a lot of discussion between the industry as well as the government. Government was very listening to us very with an open mind. There was healthy discussion, and I think over a period of time, the concerns around COVID and the fact that we didn't know how COVID would pan out, and there were of course the aspects of product development to factor in the rollout of the cafe regime. All those things were there, but over a period of time, I think what's happened is we've all, as stakeholders, the government and the industry, we've managed to stick to the original notification. There's been this, the target remains largely the same. The curve weight, which now has been factored in because of the changes that took place, also has been done as per the original plan. So the target becomes that much more slightly achievable. And therefore, you've not really heard anything come 1st April and go 1st April. There's not been too much noise. I think industry is well now poised to it's already been implemented. And I think it's something that's good for society because fuel efficiency is something we're all striving for as industry as well as the country, given the fact that we are hugely dependent upon fossil fuel imports.
Thank you, Vikram, for setting a very good perspective of how it's happened. And one thing which you mentioned, there were a lot of pulls, pushes and pressures happening before, but the transition was very smooth and it's happened in an effortless manner. That's why it hasn't made news. They say in journalism, bad news is more good news. Since everything happened smoothly, that's why it got missed out with the media also quite a lot. I'm referring to ET Auto also in this case. Now coming to Mr. Ramaswamy, you have a rich experience of the research and development space or the design space, and you're focusing a lot on new technologies in passenger vehicles. How difficult or how challenging it has been to make this transition? Because we are just looking at a number from 130 to 113. It's like the stroke of midnight, world sleeps, and we move from 130 to 113. But what has gone behind it, and what is your learnings from that?
Yeah, thank you. So, good morning again. Yeah, I think I know I'm coming from technology side. I'll try my level best, to answer in a subtle way so that, the hybrid crowd here can easily understand. Of course, as Mr. Gulati said, even though we had the technology in place, because majority of the technologies were borrowed from Europe, only the application had to be done in India to suit our conditions. Unfortunately, COVID happened, and many offices got closed, and we asked all our employees, to work from home. For the first time, also, I think even the auto industry witnessed that or proved that we can work from home. This is the challenging phase where we went through. Coming back to the question of what kind of technologies that got introduced during this time frame of last 3-4 years is to start with a simple one, ESS we call, engine stop start. Even though it looks like in a simple word, but a lot of algorithms, software that gets into the system is quite complex. That is the one we know which got introduced into the market. Secondly, on the intelligent energy management, where in today's car we do have lots of electronics, lots of software. We have in fact surpassed, auto industry has surpassed that of a commercial airline a long back. So this is the complexity where we are talking about. How do we implement this software? How do we bring in the new architecture? How do we bring in the new electronics into it so that at the end we get accuracy with our actuators? This is where I think a lot of energy has been spent by introducing a smart way of electronics control. At the same time, intelligent way of handling all our actuators. So in a simple way for our vehicles, intelligent energy management with alternator. When do we need to start and stop our alternators so that we can save energy? This is the one part which got introduced. But the third one and the biggest one, now when we talk about passenger car, especially from the powertrain itself, is the combustion. what happens inside the combustion bowl. This is where I think a majority of investments as well as the effort has gone in, both from OEMs, where OEMs concentrated majority on downsizing of their engine by introducing newer materials, and the tier one brought in a lot of electronics as well as the precision of opening and closing of our valves, which decisively decides the amount of combustion and also the nature of combustion that happens within the engine. So this is one, where we introduced the GDI, gasoline direct injection, especially on petrol engines, where we already have, direct injection in diesel, but gasoline was, tried in India. Of course, proud to say that in our company, first time we introduced GDI in India, of course, with a positive results. This is where I could put up, combustion optimization is one of the bigger areas where bigger challenges and bigger technological developments happened over the period of time to meet our
So,
CAFE
Mr. Ramaswamy,
norms.
you're talking of two big things. One is the new things in terms of architecture, software, electronics, which were never a part. I mean, most people assumed automobile was more mechanical, so there's not only a shift to mechatronics, but to much more. And the second thing which you mentioned is the real work which has gone into the combustion chambers, because that's where the proof of the pudding or where the action happens. So that's a very good perspective. Coming to you, Mr. Malhotra, ICAT has been, I would say, has been to large extent responsible for shaping the smooth transition of CAFE 2 in the industry. And ICAT has had a ringside view of the action from the manufacturers, the action from the ancillary suppliers, the action from the government bureaucracy, and action from industry bodies. What's from that perspective, when you looked at a 360 view, what have been the further developments or insights which you could share with the audience?
Thank you, Mr. Malhotra. It's pleasure to be here today, and I thank ET Auto for inviting me for this session. And this session on CAFE is very important today in terms of CO2 reduction and the targets that Government of India has to meet. CAFE history, if you allow me,
Sure.
it started way back in 2006. So it took almost 11 years to finalize the CAFE standards to be implemented in 2017-18. So it was a round of discussions, negotiations between Ministry of Power, Ministry of Road Transport and Industry, and finally arriving at a common understanding, which led to a notification wherein the CAFE standard for stage 1 and stage 2 were notified. Stage 1 began from 2017-18, started with 130 grams per kilometer, and to stage 2, which is started from April 22, is 113 grams per kilometer. The very interesting aspect about CAFE, as Mr. Malhotra said, it's a very complex mechanism to understand. It's a complex science. So how do we arrive at one number where you have number of fuels running on the vehicle, you have electric vehicles running on vehicle? So the basis of this number arrives at making all fuels equivalent to CO2 emissions. For example, even if it's a diesel vehicle, gasoline vehicle, you convert the CO2 emissions into gasoline equivalent of CO2. So diesel CO2 emission is then converted with a factor into gasoline CO2 equivalent. Similarly is for the CNG also, and also for electric vehicles. So it's a very complex calculation which goes into arriving at a number. And this number is for the auto industry as a whole, that they have a target to meet of 113 grams per kilometer. Then this target is again based on the vehicle weight. So there is an x-axis and there's a y-axis. On y-axis there are curve weights. So each manufacturer has to identify based on their vehicle pool what is their target going to be. And they have to, it's a line like this, wherein you have the CO2 here and you have a curve weight here. So each manufacturer have to find out where their vehicle pool lies, and based on that they arrive at their individual numbers. So one is a manufacturer level pool number, a cafe number, and then the industry-wide pool number. That's something which I thought I should bring on board so that things
Absolutely.
are a bit clearer. Then another important aspect which brought cafe into India is the mechanism of allotting credits and super credits. So, in a way, cafe incentivize introduction of new technologies. So there are super credits and credits for adapting certain technologies in the vehicle. For example, you can get credits for having plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. There can be strong hybrids. There can be start-stop technologies. There can be regenerative braking. There can be tire pressure monitoring system, 6-speed transmission. So any manufacturer who introduces these technologies would get certain credits in CO2. And that is how CAFE acted as a tool for incentivization for introduction of technology. Another interesting thing that brought into CAFE standard was a concept of super credit. So what is a super credit? Super credit is, for example, if a vehicle manufacturer brings in an electric vehicle. So in case of battery electric vehicles, one battery electric vehicle will be counted equivalent to 3 vehicles of equivalent gasoline. Hybrid will be 2.5 and strong hybrid will be 2 vehicles. So this is how a vehicle manufacturer is building up their technology pool so that they meet the targets. So super credits and credits is a way of introduction of technology in the auto sector. Other thing that has happened is that when the cafe started in 2006, India was going into big dieselization mode. So industry was quite confident that they will be meeting the target because diesel has an inherent advantage of CO2 emissions. Subsequently, what happened that there was a regime of non-dieselization, and there was a time when the passenger car segment around 45 to 50% was diesel car share. It has gone down to 18% and 12%. And this is where the industry became nervous and non-confident of meeting the stage 2 targets. So there was a lot of negotiation which happened between industry and ministry. ICAT has been nominated as a secretariat for CAFE standards. So what we do is we collect the annual calculation of all vehicle manufacturers based on their type approval and COP certificates. We calculate their corporate CO2 values based on the vehicle sales for each model. And this report we submit annually to Ministry of Road Transport, and it is also available on their websites. So we had an advantage of a database wherein we could advise government, or government asked us to tell us how the vehicle fleet is moving around. So we could tell, government was convinced that there is non-dieselization happening, and that has a heavy penalty on CO2. And that's how the introduction of new technologies has happened. Wherein because there were earlier talks, why should the super credits be given on certain technologies? Then we had to convince that if you give super credits, then it enables technology implementation. Also, the curve weight reduction which has happened, from 114 kilograms to 1082 in stage 2 CAFE norm has happened based on the data that we collected over last 3-4 years as to what is the average weight of the automobile manufacturers in the country. And that's how the weight class was reduced from 1145 to 1082 with the target of 113.1 grams per kilometer. So this is something in a nutshell.
So
what
one
I
thing,
can talk.
Pamela, 2-3 things I got from your when you shared the perspective. One is, the saying goes that Rome was not built in a day. We always thought that CAFE 1 started from 2017. You said the journey, the thought started from 2006. And there are so many variables which you have been incorporated, whether in terms of the type of vehicles, the diesel issues, various variables. And you said you had the super bonus points. What did you say? Super?
Super credits.
So we had heard of super over in cricket, but now we have super credits also. So that's some relationship with Dr. Lewis. And it's been a very interesting thing. And the way I view CAT's role is, one, you have to be a creator, then you have to be a conscious keeper, and then you have to be a conciliator when there's a gap between the government and the industry. So 3 Cs, you have to combine your role along with ICAT. I know that's part of your role or not. So that's been a very interesting journey. Having said that, I think the saying goes, oh great. You know, it's like sometimes when you used to get to the next class, oh, we got in, we achieved our objective. And well, when you go there, you find, no, there is much more to do. As they say in Hindi, manzile aur bhi hai, there's a long way to go. So we'll trudge on the journey for the future. And Vikram, from your perspective, because I'm sure there's a Cafe 3 around the corner, or is there a Cafe 4, we'll jump straight from Cafe 2 to Cafe 4, like we jump from BS4 to BS6. Pamela by nature is very tight-lipped on these. She knows it, but she's very tight-lipped on these issues. And Vikram, from your perspective, obviously we have to raise the bar. The bar has to be raised because the oil bill is a challenge and fuel emission definitely has to go down. From your perspective, what are things which need to be done from various stakeholders? I mean, there is industry, there is government. To make this journey smooth, we achieve the objective, but without having too much of jerks and, impacting the market. Because there is one voice which says that the more norms we are getting into, whether it's the BS4 to BS6 or whether the safety norms, we are raising the price of the vehicle and it is impacting adversely the motorization of the country. There's one voice. I'm not saying that I agree to this voice. From that perspective, I want your view.
Thank you. I'll just take a bit from what Pamela said. The reduction in diesel was basically because of BS6 and it did kind of act as a major disruptor. Now that we've had this transition and we've moved to Cafe 2 regime with the original target, it's actually a super achievement for the industry. Same thing as what happened in BS6. So just because I didn't spell that out doesn't take away from the fact that the huge effort that's been made on back of COVID. I just wanted to also place that on record. Now, the other important point to note is this thought on Cafe started in 2006. And of course, implementation started 17. The context of this, and it goes by the name also, fuel efficiency. The context of this regulation is to achieve fuel efficiency, right? Now, as we go into the next phase, normally the distance between phase 1, phase 2 was 5 years, and that's what we expect is going to be between phase 2 and phase 3. Cafe 3 would come in somewhere around 2027. But we also have to be mindful of the current context. The current context, as we all know, has gone beyond just a concern on energy security and fossil fuel reduction to a heightened concern on carbon. Now, as already explained, Cafe is basically seeking to reduce fossil fuel reduction. The emphasis is on that, and a byproduct, I won't say a byproduct, but one of the achievements is also that carbon emission is being reduced, because carbon emission and fuel efficiency are mirror images. So you measure fuel efficiency by carbon emissions. So the intended target originally was fuel efficiency of this regulation. The intended target going forward would still remain fuel efficiency, but this factor of carbon is now going to become something that is going to add a lot of more challenge to where the industry needs to go, because world over we are trying to fight climate change. India has taken a very ambitious target towards achieving net zero by 2070. Targets for 2030 are already set. So in my opinion, going ahead, one of course thing would be 2027, what comes in. The earlier the industry knows, the better it is for everybody, so that their proper planning can take place and probably a good achievement can happen. But to achieve a much more ambitious Cafe 3, in my opinion, we should also look at what other countries are doing. People in Europe, for example, they've always been ahead of the curve, and we've been following Europe. In Europe, they not only have the Cafe regime, but they have a linkage between vehicle taxation, whether it's road taxation or GST equivalent or some other usage taxation format, to carbon emission of the vehicle. Now, these two regimes are very complementary. It actually helps you to achieve a far more aggressive Cafe if you bring this regulation linkage between carbon emission of each vehicle and the taxation that you pay on it. How that works, I'll just take brief time to explain it, is on a cafe, it's an average that the corporate is trying to achieve. So you've set a target. Under the target, you have full flexibility of churning out fuel guzzling vehicles combined with fuel efficient vehicles as long as you achieve that average. So it's achieving a goal to a certain extent. But what taxation linked to carbon does is it kind of disrupts, or that's a negative word, but it kinds of unleashes innovation in each segment of the vehicle market. For example, just to explain, if there is a segment X, let's say the segment B, and you have 5 makers there, all 5 are being taxed at a particular rate that exists today, which is based upon parameters like the size of the vehicle, size of the engine, the volume of the engine, or the displacement from the ground. None of these factors have any relationship to a socially relevant output other than size. Now, if the taxation were to be linked to carbon emission of each vehicle, I as a company can try to reach a carbon number for that particular segment vehicle to go to the lower segment in terms of taxation. The moment I do that, the entire competition gets disrupted. Everybody has to move below. It unleashes market forces working towards lowering carbon. It unleashes innovation. And that's why Europe has been able to do a far more aggressive cafe movement going ahead.
So Vikram, you talked of 2 things. One is that cafe should not be only seen in a very simplistic term in terms of carbon dioxide emissions based on the curve weight. We are talking of carbon neutrality or carbon footprints being reduced. And you were given a unique idea that why can't the carbon or the cafe score get a linkage to the GST?
Slightly different. Cafe B, what it is, carry on. In addition to that, link GST to carbon emission of each vehicle.
Okay. So each vehicle model. So we were talking of cafe in terms of a manufacturer. Within the manufacturer's portfolio, there is various models. Some of the models which may be legacy models may be more guzzlers or more emitters which are there. So what Mr. Gulati is saying that how do you, it becomes a catalyst, how do you inspire, motivate, push manufacturers so as to raise the bar further? Because they will get a benefit once they come to the level which is there. But it will be, because traditionally the way the auto industry, the GST has worked is based on length, lambai or wazan, length and weight. That has been the criteria or the CC. When I say weight, I would say engine capacity.
Just one bit I want to add. This is not something new I've thought of. This actually came out in the draft National Auto Policy that Department of Heavy Industry came out with in, I think, 2019.
Okay.
25 or 26 countries of Europe actually follow this besides the cafe regime that they have. Okay. Just wanted to bring that up.
So a lot of food for thought, and if this view could be even projected, I think a very insightful thing. Coming to Mr. Ramaswamy, your task is being more and more difficult. Mr. Gulati has, Vikram Gulati has already put a googly. You do this. So obviously there are already pressures, and you talked of the pressures in terms of the technologies in electronics and also the pressure in terms of combustion chamber. Now there's one important thing. You may do anything, and which is good to have low carbon footprints, but you need to have a price value equation of the product in customers' terms. From that perspective, in cost terms, and there's a time base. I mean, it's very easy to say that do this, do that, but I'm sure in R&D or in design development it takes time. So what do you think the journey should be? And you have to take from the customer's perspective, from what Mr. Vikram Gulati has said, and we need to lower the low emissions, but we also look at the market even.
Yeah, definitely, yes. I think, maybe just start with this mobile phone itself. All of us use day in, day out. Unfortunately, the difference between the mobile phone, electronics and software, what it has inside compared to a car is different. Many of us gone through that, mobile phone restarts automatically. But we cannot afford to have that, when we are driving a car, right? This is where, the differentiation of technology plays an important role for a technology company like us. So I can put the technology progress towards the future in 2 buckets. One is on the software, other one is on the electronics. So coming to software, uh, there are different, architecture that are getting evolved. It's always better for a new company or a company that wants to step into this, EV field has to decide on the software architecture. So in today's car, when you see each electronics means each component, we have a controller and we control the respective either braking or an engine management system with a separate controller. So moving forward, I think the next technology talks about the zone controller we call. Zone in the sense you can combine, all related, components. For example, front end of the car, you make a zone. Middle of the car, make a zone. Back end of the car, make a zone. So like that, you'll be able to control because the amount of electronics that gets in will only exponentially increase in going forward. So we cannot manage by having, individual controllers. The next step is the master controllers, where we need decision making capabilities for these zones. This is where I think we also distribute these decision making capabilities to different buckets. And then the final step is the server based architecture, where we do or we move all our common calculations to a server, where we don't need to do all the calculation every time. So this is where I think this four-step approach architecture is the future, which I think we already have some piloting, being done in Europe. The good part is that you can, once we have a good part of, vehicles running there, I think we can definitely reuse it. One suggestion that's from my side is that, we need to talk about this architecture from the software perspective when we, go in for a newer, introduction. The second part on the electronics, as I said, I think electronics is the way that gets into the car. So once there is an electronics, the software will also go high. So when we come to electronics itself, we have the master controllers, which are the decision makers, which are the brain of any car that needs to be there. Second comes the e-machines, which is the propulsion system for a car that has to be combined with the electronics. Then we have the inverters, which manages the e-machines with an optimal efficiency. And the converters, DC-DC converters, that gives, right amount of, power to the individual, components within the car. And of course, on the thermal management, which plays an important role. We are talking about 800-volt system inside a car. We need to have a proper thermal management there. And finally, the energy management, that is the battery management. So when you see all these things, it has a lot of electronics. Today's cars are running on electronics, no doubt on that. Do we have a solution for the future with optimization also, as Arun said, on the cost front? Yes, we do have. So today's electronics are based on normal silicons. The future is based on silicon carbide. We call it as SiC, S-I-C. It's not a good word, but SiC is the word, which gets prominent going forward, silicon carbide, that gets populated into all these electronics, which has the capability of, fast charging, for example, like how we do. You enter a fuel pump, you come out. That is where we are aiming at. How we achieve? By introducing silicon carbide. So in a nutshell, I think I would say these are the two broader buckets from software architecture and the electronics with silicon carbide, the future of our.
So what Mr. Ramaswamy said is the potential is huge. The only question is that, but the complexity is also huge. You're talking about architecture, you're talking about electronics, you're talking about software, and then you're trying to synchronize it. It's like the much more difficult task than what a Zubeen Mehta would have in an orchestra, to synchronize so that they have to work. Otherwise, it can become a cacophony instead of synchronization. Coming to Pamela, you heard Mr. Vikram Gulati and you also heard Mr. Ramaswamy. What is the direction? I mean, and you've also interact with the government policy and you have a perspective of everything. What do you think, how it will, I'm sure you cannot disclose everything and a lot of things will be work in progress. But how do you think this journey, because you have to start on this journey from today. It can't start 2 years later, because if we are going to have it, say 2027, how this journey should start and what are your expectations from different stakeholders for the journey?
I think we are seeing there are a lot of initiatives being taken by government in respect to reducing carbon footprint for the country. and auto industry is something which is of prime importance and prime focus, and we see that a lot of focus on biofuel introduction is happening. There's a lot of focus happening on EV introduction. There are, government is incentivizing manufacturing through PLI schemes for battery, for motors, for electric vehicles. And also another thing that is started being talked about is hydrogen economy. So green hydrogen, blue hydrogen. Amidst of this numerous initiatives which the government is taking, I'm sure auto industry is having a nightmare as to how they are going to plan their products, you know.
पर उस रात की कोई सुबह होनी चाहिए, ऐसा ना कि उस रात की सुबह ना हो.
हर रात की सुबह होती है, तभी रात होती है. So the thing is that in India we start with lot of commotion, we start with lot of turmoil, but at the end we do achieve what we want to achieve, and we have seen it happening in both Cafe 1 and Cafe 2 also. I'm sure Cafe 3 will emerge much stronger, much robust norm, which will be based on the policy at a national level, and that policy has to be aligned to a global level, and that discussion will start happening based on the we also have to see that we need auto industry to grow. We cannot burden auto industry with numerous technological challenges, and that creates a burden for them to innovate, to progress.
You know, one of the things which people say is that the government or the industry doesn't give enough time to the industry to plan out. So I hope you are going to put the Cafe 3 announcement
No,
much
I
before.
think industry gets enough time because industry is involved in discussions and interventions which government is talking right from day one.
So
So
they have a fair
industry
idea.
is never taken by surprise.
Vikram, you agree with her or no? You frank, yes or no? Answer has to be yes or no.
I can't say yes, I can't say no. So I would say partly agree.
Partly.
So
That's a
he
very
agrees.
diplomatic.
So
Mr. Vikram.
so industry is part and parcel of each, because industry is
Okay.
a very important stakeholder. No decision will government take
Okay.
where industry
That's very
doesn't
heartening.
is not on board. So we don't want to harm industry. We want to propagate industry and want to grow the industry. So government also has a similar intention. So whatever happens, it happens with the
Concurrence, huh?
with concurrence of industry, of course.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
So that's very interesting which you said. Anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, I missed couple of things which I think Mr. Ramaswamy and Mr. Gulati did not touch upon. That one of the important outcomes of cafe norms is that it has made challenges for the auto industry for going towards lightweighting. So while electronics, while computerization, while improvement of combustion efficiency has been an outcome of cafe, but a very important factor that has come out of cafe is lightweighting, and that's more challenging because cafe and crash norms came together. So crash norms lead to heavy weighting, while cafe leads to lightweighting. So this has led to an innovation of getting lightweight, high strength material introduction in automobiles, and hence the lightweighting is also important. Engines which used to be earlier ferrous engines have moved to aluminum based engines, and there is also a lot of lightweighting happening to other components also. So lightweighting is one important outcome of cafe standards. The other thing that was, I find sometimes.
Yeah, please.
You touched upon what about heavy duty vehicles and two-wheeler industry.
They don't want to be noticed early.
No. There was a discussion on heavy duty fuel efficiency standard. But you see, heavy duty segment is a very complex segment. You know, what happens is the engine is manufactured by one manufacturer, and then the OEM manufactures a chassis, and the chassis gets developed into different kind of vehicle application. Whether it will be used for goods transfer, or it will be used for passenger transfer, or it will be used for construction equipment. So it was very difficult for fuel efficiency norms to be defined on a vehicle level. Industry was wanting to go for an engine based level, which is based on the European practice of software called Vecto. But we don't have that software available in the country, so it didn't take off in that way. But there is a trial going on wherein how to introduce fuel efficiency norms in heavy duty commercial vehicles is a study going on that. The other aspect was that there were two-wheeler was also being talked about for CAFE standards or fuel efficiency standards. Because two-wheelers are large in the numbers, 76% of vehicle fleet constitutes two-wheelers. But what we have seen is that due to FAME and electrification, we see large number of electric two-wheeler introduction happening in the country. So we find that movement from IC engine-based two-wheelers to electric two-wheelers is a natural transition happening, and it is reducing the CO2 emissions from two-wheeler industry as a fleet, as a pool of vehicles on road. Yeah.
So Pamela, 2-3 key points which came out. Clearly, one you are saying is lightweighting is something which you should lose sight of, because lightweighting can help definitely in terms of emission, because you need to lightweight, and you said there's an inverse relationship between crashing and CAFE norms, because when you talk of vehicles which have a better crash limit, they have to be. The second part which you said is that there is a debate, dialogue and discussion which goes on continuously in the industry. It's not a discourse or a dictate. That's what I understand. So you can be reassured on that, and that can be a reassuring factor. And the other thing which is there, that other elements or other parts of the industry, whether it's two-wheelers, and you said already the electrification is happening much faster. So should we look at it? And in commercial vehicles and looking at the categories, it's a thing. But I think more things will emerge out. But there is a consensus that whether it's technological innovation, which Mr. Ramaswamy talked of, whether it's something unique which Mr. Vikram Gulati talked of, where you want to incentivize or stimulate innovation in terms of giving better incentives, and then this entire policy of taking also perspectives of other countries, because there's a lot of knowledge to be gained. Not that you have to copy it, you need to emulate it. So I think we are moving out of time, but we'll move to the last round, and they'll be very short. Nabil, you have to give us just 3-4 minutes more. We'll move to the rapid fire round. So don't take it as a Karan Johar thing, like I'll stump people like Hardik Pandey or KL Rahul when they got into trouble. You won't get into trouble. This is much more simpler than a Karan Johar show. So I'd like to ask each of the panelists 2 things which you think the industry must do, and 2 things which you think the government must do to ensure that we move ahead fast on the journey of CAFE norms for the society, for the country. So 2 things, and there's the old saying, do not ask what the country does for you, but ask what you can do for the country. So 2 things which you think industry must do, which they are not doing, and 2 things government should do, which they are not probably focusing on. So we'll start with you now, Mr. Ramaswamy. We'll start with him first. We'll come to you, and ma'am will have the last word.
For me, important thing from the government perspective is on the infrastructure, where we need to bring in more and more charging stations.
So infrastructure is one. So we'll have bullet point form. Second.
Yeah. Second, from the policy perspective, we are banking on all the 4 technologies in India, especially electric vehicles, CNG, as well as hydrogen will be a natural, for heavy-duty vehicles. And also along with that, we'll have the ethanol blending. So how do we manage this?
So different technologies which are in the space of the auto industry.
Exactly.
So infrastructure and different technologies which is there. That's from the part of the government you're saying.
Government.
Now, from the industry perspective?
Industry perspective, today we are in a good position that, we do have the technologies from the West, and the application of those technologies without reinventing the wheel. That's where the application, makes an important aspect for us, where we need to take the technology from the West and, implement it.
Okay, so that's one thing.
Yeah.
Second, anything?
I think second one, again, fast market. This is where I think with the aid of, this already available technologies, we need to find ways, how do we come the way to introduce products at a faster rate.
Faster rate. So good, Mr. Ramaswamy. Coming to Mr. Gulati, 2 bullet points. What do you think the industry should do, and 2 things the government should do, which they are not doing, or they need to do at a faster pace?
So I'll not repeat as far as industry. I think we need to focus on skilling, because we're going into a
Skilling is one important area.
technology transition. Second, I think we must be more flexible in looking at various technological options, depending upon which our context, and therefore being.
So that's the second point.
And just to complete the second point, look at R&D from a mid to long term, because
Long-term perspective.
Yeah.
Okay.
So as far as government is concerned, first thing I would say is focus on the end objective, which is either fuel consumption reduction or carbon. Let the market decide the technologies. go in for very impactful, simple, innovative, transparent policies which are effective globally, like carbon taxation has proven to be.
Okay, good. Pamela, from your side, two things which industry should do and two things government should do.
Two things which I think industry should do is that they should do a lot of innovation and research and development in country. They should be less dependent on such technology adaptation from overseas, so that we have the know-how locally available, and also we have a skill set available in the country. Another thing, industry should also focus on developing the local, vendor bases here, rather than being dependent on global supply chain. So we have seen during COVID time and also during the current scenario where semiconductors are in a big shortage, and there are the waiting time for vehicle delivery is 9 months to 10 months. So we should develop a local supply chain. Government, as I said, should have a clear-cut roadmap defined as to what the end target is going to be. Then the automobile manufacturers will align their product development in those areas. Also, government should take initiative in creating infrastructure for developing skill sets in academic institutes, enhance industry academia association and interaction. So we have academia doing a lot of research, but unfortunately it is limited to the academia only.
So
It
there's
is
more
not
alignment which is there.
industry-oriented research. So that's what I would like.
Okay, good. So we've got this thing. I'll just take two questions from the audience, and my request to the audience will be keep the question not more than 30 seconds. And I'll ask the panelists also to keep the answer to 1 minute. Otherwise, we will have three questions. So just question, 30 seconds is the question. So, and you can direct the question to any particular panelist you want.
So, good morning, all of you. So, my question is to Vikram sir. So, out of two technologies, CNG technology and EV technology, which you feel that in India it will expand more quickly and realistically?
But is this related to the topic of today, cafe norms? I'm just asking. Keep the question
it's not
limited to that.
related to
So let's have a question
yeah.
limited to that area, because the panel, because there will be other panels on
I'm
that.
considering
Okay, you can
CNG
still answer.
technology
You can
and
still
EV
answer, but short answer. But the other people, I would refer to what is being discussed. Yeah, Vikram, from your side.
Well, I would just have to, it's not really a question because it's a given. In the current context, CNG definitely will be outpacing EV. In the long term, one has to see.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Vandan Sharma from Lubrizol. So my question is that with the E20 implementation from 2023 to 2025, so how government and automotive industry will balance the E20 fuel economy deficit and CAFE 2 norms?
So Pamela, would you like to take this question?
I mean, there will be no change in the CAFE 2 norms. So E20 introduction will not change the CAFE norms in any way.
So how will how the fuel economy deficit will be compensated with CAFE 2 norms? Like in one way we are going with the higher CAFE norms or lesser CO2 consumption per gram per kilometer, and in the another way with E20 implementation, the fuel economy will be reduced.
But then the whole vehicle fleet will have a mix of ethanol blended fuel and electric vehicle and CNG vehicles. So it's again on a fleet basis the targets have to be achieved. It's not one particular manufacturer has to achieve a target for ethanol based vehicle and CNG based. It's on the full pool of vehicles that the manufacturer manufactures. They have to meet the targets.
This is Raman here.
Yeah.
I am referring to Madam's discussion around academia is doing research, but in silos, right? The industry needed research is not happening in academia. So if you refer overseas, it's different. From industries, from academia only, industry-related technologies initially germinate, then industries come in to collaborate and commercialize that, right? So how can we do that here also? What is the challenge that we see from government side?
So what he's saying is, how can that happen more better?
So that can only happen if we start building trust with each other. So there is a trust deficit of industry on academia, and hence the academia also is not industry oriented. So there has to be a trust built between industry and academia, that whatever projects they will give to in academia, they will deliver it. And academia has to also align themselves to the industry needs. Industry has very short term targets and they are very focused. If they have to develop something in 10 months time, means it has to be 10 minus 1 month time.
Okay.
But that orientation of academia is not there. In academia, the research happens, if not 1 year, 2 year, 3, it gets extended. So both have to orient themselves on each other's requirement and hence meet the targets.
So we would like to take more questions, but we are totally out of time. I mean, the time is showing that we have crossed it by 5 minutes. But thanks all the panelists. But more than the panelists, I would thank the audience for coming in such large numbers and putting questions. So it's been very insightful, getting a perspective from the field of policy, testing, homologation agency, manufacturers, customers, R&D developers, designers, and getting your perspective. So thank you very much to the panelists and thank you very much to the audience for this discussion.
Thank you, everyone.